Hi, welcome to my new channel where I'm going to be talking about my adventures in my studio here in San Miguel de Allende. Now, those of you that have been following my previous channel, Not Dead Yet, Adventures and Reflections, I'm going to keep up with that travel, which is lately has been mostly about my hiking adventures and travels and things like that. So I will be keeping up with that channel, but I'm starting this new channel just to sort of focus on what's happening here in my studio in San Miguel de Allende. So I'll be reviewing a lot of my past work in future videos, probably, and how it relates to what I've got going on right now. And who knows what I'm going to be doing? I may spend a video where I'm talking a little bit more about materials and techniques, and in others where I'm talking about the conceptual aspects of my work, things like that. But just a way for me to bring people into my studio and maybe even get some important feedback. I find that I spend a lot of my time here in the studio with me and my dogs, and don't really have that much interaction with other people to get feedback on my work. For many years, when I was an arts educator, I was creating videos for my studio and for my students to use as a reference. And I think it's something that I still sort of feel compelled to do because I found that those videos that I was creating for my students to use as a reference were also a good way for me to sort of step back and reflect on, what ideas that I had about art making. So, so let's go ahead and just sort of get started. And let me sort of clue you in right now for this first video, just to show you what I've been up to since I've set up my studio here in San Miguel de Allende. Those of you who may already know this, but for those who don't know, last year I moved to San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, and so I've got my studio set up here now. And I've also just recently, maybe a couple of months ago, started a new body of work, something that I've actually been thinking about for a long time. And so, for this video, I think I'm just going to go around and talk a little bit about the stuff that I'm doing now. And it's related to, I've only got about, I think five paintings that are started. None of them I really consider complete yet. Some of them are getting pretty close. In fact, most of them are. So let me just sort of show you. And the one that I've been working on, now today is this piece right here. But all of these, this new series that I'm doing is based upon memories. So they're narrative works of art. They sort of tell a story, but they're all personal stories based upon my memories. And right now, anyway, these memories are going as far back to my childhood as I can. I know a lot of people tell me that they can remember when they were like 1 or 2 years old, have memories from then. For me, I think the furthest back that my memories go is when I was maybe about 4 years old. And so some of these memories, in fact, the one that I'm working on now, I was probably 4, maybe 5 years old when I had this memory, which is what this painting is based upon. And anyway, so let me just sort of clue you in on the narrative. Now, that's another thing about art, and what I would often tell my students is that, the viewer doesn't necessarily need to respond to the painting in the way that you respond to your own painting. I've always encouraged my students to find their own voice and to say something. And even when you're with paintings, it's a little, especially if it's a narrative work, the viewer may or may not get your story. But that's true even if you're writing a novel. Somebody else, one person might read Charles Dickens and come away with a completely different impression than someone else, no matter who the author is. And communication is a two-way thing. You can, whatever you say. In fact, we've all probably had these experiences where you've said something trying to communicate, a message to someone else, and for whatever reason, they completely misinterpreted what you were really trying to say. And you know what? That's all right. The creative process is what I always told my students is an ongoing process. I may be finished with a work of art, but a viewer that's looking at it, they bring their own perspective and background into their interpretation of that work. So I don't worry that, and in fact, someone looking at any of my paintings really probably won't necessarily, if I'm doing a narrative work, they won't necessarily, be able to, recite my specific story, but they'll bring their own perspective to it and their own impressions, and come up with their own narrative. But I'm going to just sort of quickly go through these paintings that I've got started, these first few paintings that I've got started, just to give you a little bit of an idea, what my inspirations are. And so, let's get back to this one. This is the one that I've, been working on today. But like I said, all these, the other ones that I'm going to show you, have been, I'm still in the process. Some of them are really close to being done. And this one's fairly close. But anyway, this is, as you look at this, obviously the content, I've got this, little, this toy electric train and the dog in the background and the room with the sofa and the kitchen and the little, box from, if you remember a little childhood game that I used to play with my big sister and our next door neighbor, called Candyland. But this is from a memory. I remember when when I was, 4 or 5 years old, my mother worked. And my big sister would go off to school. She was, in second or third grade, who knows what. And along with the neighbor kid, and her name was Judy. And Judy's mother, our next door neighbor, would sort of babysit me. I would go over to their house during the day while my mother was at work. And they had this train set that I was really fond of. And I distinctly remember, setting that up and playing with that. But they also had a dog named Buttons, a Dachshund dog. And now, when you look at the dog here, you see, growling and showing her teeth, Buttons. Buttons was actually a very sweet dog. However, I don't think Buttons was very fond of that train. And, I was a young kid and, who knows, from time to time I might have decided to pull Buttons' tail or something like that. But I remember that, Buttons would bite me sometimes. And so I show Buttons there, not happy with the train and probably me as well, maybe playing a little too rough with her. So this is that childhood memory. So let's move on to another painting. This was actually the first painting that I did in this series. And it's here again based upon a toy. Most of my most vivid memories as a child tend to center around toys and things that I would play with. And so I remember I think it was a Christmas present, I got some Rock'em Sock'em robots. And so this is sort of my acknowledgement of that memory. I know I spent a lot of time playing with those. Now, this is another thing that I've done. You'll notice, I've got myself portrayed in here as an adult. So I think what I'm going to be, at least what I've done in a couple of my paintings that I've done so far, whenever I've put myself into the narrative, this is my revisiting these memories. So I don't portray myself as maybe I was 7 or 8 years old, probably 8 years old when I got these Rock'em Sock'em robots. So I'm not portraying myself as a as a child. In these, I'm showing myself as an adult, revisiting these memories. So this is the Rock'em Sock'em robots memory. And now I've got another painting over here. This one isn't as far. I've got a lot more work to be doing on this one. To just basically, I just want to make the paint, more interesting paint. It's just a little flat right now. I've got the the overall composition in there, and I'm telling my story, but I just want to embellish it a little bit, embellish the paint a bit more. But this is when I was young. I enjoyed playing baseball a lot. I played Little League, but this one really does sort of address some of the more negative things that sort of interact, with some of the negative influences and experiences from my childhood. I've got this little cocktail thing, and that just sort of represents, here again, I think I've all in all had a pretty good childhood. And so, I'm not, wanting to play a violin and try to, suggest that, I had a horrible childhood. In fact, I didn't. Most of my memories are very fond memories, but I do have some memories of, adults. The cocktail glass there sort of represents adult influences in my childhood experiences, where adults would sometimes interfere with my childhood experiences. Over here, here's one that's, here again, none of these are really done yet, but this is from a childhood memory. This is probably the one where might have been the oldest. I might have been, maybe 9 or 10 years old, maybe. Grade school, still pretty young. But this is a memory I had. One day I was walking home from school, and on the ground I found this slingshot. And I thought, well, that's really cool. And I picked it up and I think, boy, this is my lucky day. And I brought this slingshot home. And eventually, my mother got home from work, and I showed it to her. And my mother, and here's an example of how, as I lived the experience, I didn't really get the whole story and didn't really quite understand. But as I revisit, these experiences in my adulthood, I'm able to bring some hindsight to it and actually see the story a little bit differently. So here's the story as it occurred. When I was, in grade school. I bring this slingshot home. My mother sees it, and my mother, in hindsight, I realize she was not really keen on the idea of me having a slingshot, thinking it was going to be dangerous and I was going to put my eye out or somebody else's eye or something like that. But my mother was kind of clever. And I remember her, as soon as I showed it to her, and say, yeah, I found it, it's lying in the street. I walk on my way walking from home. My mother didn't say, Billy, I don't want you playing with that slingshot. I think that's dangerous. You need to, you can't have that. She didn't do that. What she did was she said, she asked, proposed the question, I wonder who lost that slingshot. I wonder what little boy lost his slingshot. And boy, I hope that wasn't the only toy that he had. He's probably really sorry that he no longer has his slingshot. And, she, maybe went on a little bit more, trying to get this image of this young boy that is now mourning the loss of his prized toy, this slingshot. So, what I did, and this is what I remember doing, I immediately, left the house and went walking down the street to the exact spot where I had found that slingshot, and I set it down and left it there, and I no longer had a slingshot. And at the time, I was buying my mother's story about the poor boy who lost it, and that all might be true. Maybe he did eventually come back and find his slingshot, and he was happy again. I don't know, but I now understand my mother's motives in telling me getting me to think and empathize with that young boy. And then so I've got this is I think this might be the only other one that I've started, and this one is probably not nearly finished. I've got a lot of more work to do on this one, but this is just a real simple memory I have of my father. Now, my parents were divorced when I was quite young, so my early childhood memories of my father are indeed quite early, and I was probably here again 4 years old at this time, and this was the house that we lived in next door to the house where my babysitter was, and it was a tiny little duplex home, and it had along the side of it, did have a basement, as you can see by the basement window, and a little sidewalk. And I can remember my father trying to teach. He was very interested in sports, and that was one of the ways that in the early years and even in our later years, eventually sort of it was through sports that we really did most of our bonding and communicating with one another. But I distinctly remember him taking me out along this sidewalk that went along the side of this tiny little duplex home. He was trying to teach me how to dribble a basketball. And what I remember is distinctly his voice. I can still hear his voice telling me, "Dribble it, don't slap it. Dribble it, don't slap it." Evidently, I was, with to properly dribble a basketball, you use your fingertips and to control the ball. And I think because I was so small and not very coordinated, I think I was slapping it with the palm of my hand, and he was trying to get me to dribble it in a more efficient way, which I think for somebody 4 years old really wasn't something I was capable of. But that his voice, I can still remember my father's voice saying, "Dribble it, don't slap it." So, and these are the only 5 paintings that I've got going in this series right now, but I do plan on doing at least a dozen or so of them. So these are the first 5 of this series, and I do plan on doing at least a dozen or so more. So my creative process, there's a piece of cardboard around here somewhere. What I do when I come up with a memory, as I quickly jot down a little note, usually just 1 or 2 words. Just for this one, I might have just written down slingshot, or a rock'em sock'em robots or whatever. And I've got somewhere I've got a piece of cardboard where I'm just sort of like writing down these little ideas as I come up with them. And I've got I think at least a dozen of them that are possible paintings that I might be doing. And so I've got a feeling that this series will keep me busy for at least another 6 months. And we'll sort of see where it takes me. Now, I've been writing down these notes, but as I've been doing them, these are all narratives. So what I am thinking about doing actually is in addition to simply writing down, those quick little 1 or 2 little notes to give me to remind me of what the thought was. As I've been working on them, developing them and painting them, I've been, really coming up with a narrative, a much more detailed narratives rather than just the little notes. So I might actually, for each painting, start actually writing out the narratives in a little more detail, almost like an autobiography. So we'll see where that might take me. So I might actually start doing a little more writing to accompany some of these paintings. But that's pretty much it. That's what's happening in my studio right now. And I'm going to be getting into, in future videos, I'll be talking about these things in a little more detail, talking about, other things that have been influencing my work. I might talk a little bit about some of the techniques that I'm using, although my work is really pretty straightforward in terms of the techniques. I'll probably do a lot of talking about how other artists have influenced my work, and actually makes me a little sheepish about sharing my own artwork, because I've through the years have had the opportunity to work with some really terrific artists, and their work is gorgeous, and when I look at my own painting, I realize how my work in many ways falls short of what artists that I have worked with in the past and some friends of mine, the work that they have done really humbles my own work. So yeah, that's it. So welcome to my new studio that I set up here in San Miguel de Allende, and yeah, we'll see where all this goes.